If you want to live in an area where there's practically no natural disasters, Maine might be the perfect place for you. So let's talk about it. My name's Margaret. My dad, Michael, and I make videos to educate you about living in the Southern Maine area. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All of our information's down below. So first, let's talk about the natural disasters we don't have. So Maine's air is too cold and we don't really have the right atmospheric conditions for tornadoes. Our waters are too cold for hurricanes to really happen up here. And as far as earthquakes go, we actually sit on the middle of a tectonic plate. So there's no active fault lines under the state of Maine, meaning we get very few earthquakes. And if we do get them, they're pretty minor. To give you an example of that, we had an earthquake maybe 2 months ago here in the state of Maine, and I noticed a rumbling, and so I called my mom, and she thought over at my parents' house that a big truck drove by. So that kind of tells you the magnitude of like one of the bigger earthquakes that we get around here. We definitely get them. We also get tornadoes. We definitely don't really get hurricanes, but you know, someone's going to come for me in the comments and be like, we do too get tornadoes, but they are so minor that you probably won't know they're happening until you see it in the news the next day. Same thing with earthquakes. You might be like, what was that? Was that an earthquake? Up until a couple of months ago, the most recent kind of big earthquake we had in the state of Maine was back when I was in early middle school. So those kind of events are very few and far between. We don't get them very often, and they're very minor. So those are what we don't get. But what do we actually get here in the state of Maine? Because, you know, nothing's perfect. So we do get some pretty heavy winter storms, and in certain areas we definitely get flooding, especially around the coast. So certain areas are going to experience this worse than others. And obviously up north, you're going to experience winter storms once in a while. When you live on the coast, that can make things a little bit different. Things can get a little bit windier. And definitely in those coastal towns, when you experience the flooding along with those winter storms, it can make things a lot worse. There are certain areas of town that flood every single time, really on a regular basis at this point, but more so specifically when we have those crazy winter storms where the ocean's roaring like crazy, the water's going over the seawall. Certain areas, like everywhere else, you're required to have flood insurance because the flooding can get pretty bad. All things considered, in other parts of the country, we're still above sea level, so there are obviously areas where this would be worse, but we do experience flooding in certain areas, and the winter storms are not to be messed with, especially if you're moving here from an area where you don't get a lot of snow. It can definitely be a bit of a shock, and it can be quite a bit to deal with if you're not used to it. You have to learn to drive around in the snow and really prepare your home for those winter months when the temperature is really cold outside. So all in all, we don't really get a lot of natural disasters in Maine. Everything that we get is pretty minor. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out. Again, my name's Margaret, and we'll see you next time.